Hajnalka.
So good afternoon. Sziasztok.
My name is Somogyi, and on behalf of the team of OFF-Biennale, I would like to warmly welcome you to the first day of our symposium, The Season of Darkness, Being Civil in an Uncivil Society. First of all, my apologies for not being there today with you, but this morning I tested positive to COVID, which is unfortunate, but also somehow perfect, because nothing could bring us back more precisely to the times when we were preparing for document of 15, and when our interlocal collaboration unfolded. This collaboration of many small, fragile civil art organizations across the globe that, swimming against the tides in the midst of the pandemics and all kinds of adversities, put together that mind-blowing universe, ecosystems and cosmologies last summer, that the art world of old could neither spit nor swallow, as the Hungarians would say. As in many ways the documentary experience has shown us, and as we can see anytime we look around or read the news, social utopia of solidarity, collaboration, sharing and care, while desperately needed, seem hardly viable these days. As our somewhat romantic title, The Season of Darkness, suggests, the situation is dire. There's a full-fledged Cold War right next to us, waged by Russia against Ukraine. And our region, indeed the whole continent, is gripped by growing populism and nationalism, conveniently paired with racism, xenophobia, the stigmatization of minorities, and neoliberal greed and widespread corruption. This political agenda withdraws from public services, while vilifying civil organizations and hindering their work. So from the other viewpoint, one can say that with the systems of public and social services deteriorating, there's a growing amount of work dumped on concerned citizens, forcing us into civil action, while the playing field is becoming steeper by the day. They despise us and they are afraid of us, because we represent independent thinking, resilience, and the willingness to act, to swim against the tide. And with us, it's different us. So if us, spoiled Europeans, are out of ideas how to carry on, oftentimes it is the work of our allies in the Global South, or in the strategies of repressed minorities like the Romani people here in Europe, that we find methods and inspiration. And so inviting you all here to organize this conference, as we are very much intrigued to learn how to survive as civil players in the arts. And also why. In other words, what do you find important and meaningful under these circumstances in your respective fields and roles? What do you find worth fighting for? And so I would like to thank all the participants of the symposium for accepting our invitation and bringing their knowledge and their experience and their spirit to this common table. I'd like to thank the OFF-Biennale for hosting us. I'd like to thank the audience, both on site and online, for their time and interest. And last but not least, I'd like to thank our supporters, the Goethe Institute Budapest, the Creative Group program by the European Commission, as this symposium is the final act of European cooperation called From Complicated Pasts to Our Direct Futures. And this is the Institute also in Budapest. This symposium will continue tomorrow and Friday morning as well. It is accompanied by a selection of the Lumbung film collection that you can watch in UNHCR this week and next week from Wednesday to Saturday in the afternoons. And finally, we have a solidarity stream, an anthology of short films by visual artists from Ukraine, shot after the start of the full-scale Russian military invasion last February, that we will present here tonight, in UNHCR, but also that you can watch online internationally until June 11 for a small donation, thanks to our collaboration with the Eszter Film Festival. So if you can afford it, please donate to our partner, the Emergency Support Initiative, and watch the anthology. For the links and more info, please visit our website and our Facebook page. And now I'd like to give the floor to my colleague, Eszter Szakács, who will introduce today's program. So thank you for your attention, and I wish you will enjoy the conversations.
Hello everyone. Again a warm welcome to the symposium, the Season of Darkness being considered in civil society. And I would just like to briefly introduce the moderator and the host our first panel or first roundtable discussion, Luca Petrányi, and she will then introduce the further participant. And the title of this roundtable discussion is Lumbung, Experiences, Lessons Learned, and Visions for the Future. And Luca Petrányi is an architect, visual artist, and curator. She graduated from the Bologna University of Art and Design in 2018 with a degree in architecture. Since 2016, she has spent 3 years in Indonesia on the Dharmasis World Scholarship Program, where she has studied traditional dance and textile dyeing, the latter which she is still actively practicing. She has participated in several visual art projects in Indonesia, both as an artist and as a curator. The 3 years she spent there laid the foundations for her enduring interest in alternatives that transcend colonial heritage, particularly in relation to artistic practice. She is currently completing her PhD in practice research at the Bologna University of Art and Design, while also working as a theatre set designer. She's also a board member of the Student Young Artists Association and the founder and organizer of Useless Gallery and the Day1 Camp community, together with Fanny Schorman. And I would like to give the floor to Luca, and she will introduce the participants.
Thank you, Eszter. Maybe Katarina, Eszter can join. We only got one instruction that we need to talk in the microphone very loud to hear the others. And will we see the participants online? Maybe Farid and Hajnalka Matthias. Right. How okay, so let's start. I would like to welcome everybody here in the offline space, in the Square, but also online. My name is Luca Petrányi, and I will be moderating this discussion. Just a few personal words before we start. I'm really personally attached to this topic, so I'm really happy for this invitation, because at the official announcement of document 15, I was still living in Indonesia, so I really shared the excitement with Indonesian friends. And later on, a year later, the new announcement came that OFF-Biennale was also chosen to participate in it, so I really shared the two-sided excitement with friends from Indonesia and Hungary. First of all, let me introduce my partners in conversation. And I decided to introduce them by their general activities and not their contribution to document 15, because the topic of this roundtable is something more elevated and wider perspective of it. And apologies that I'm going to read it out loud, because otherwise it would be really slow. So here in the offline space we have Eszter and Katalin, members of OFF-Biennale Budapest. The project was established as a grassroots initiation in 2014 with the aim to generate civil engagements through contemporary art. The initiative existed through 3 editions, and now they are preparing for the 4th edition, which will be held in 2024 autumn. It is important to mention that its activities try to establish a new way of working in the culture that is directed by government mandates. OFF refuses Hungarian state funding and rarely collaborates with state-run art institutions. OFF-Biennále's mission is to strengthen the local independent art scene and initiate public discourse about urgent social, political, and environmental issues. OFF is a constant experiment that realizes the vision of a sustainable and democratic institution in the civil sphere. And then, in the online space, we have Matthias Einhoff from ZKU Berlin, Center for Art and Urbanistics. The collective was founded in 2012 when 3 members of the artist collective Kunstrepublik moved into an abandoned freight station in Berlin's Moabit neighborhood. Kunstrepublik is the organization behind ZKU, who tries to link global discourses to local actions. On the crossroads between art, research, and everyday surroundings, it investigates the multi-layered dynamics of urban spaces and creates experimental formats and projects that serve as a model for new scenarios. ZKU proposes alternative models for neighborhood empowerment and participation, often in exchange with other artists. And then, last but not least, farid rakun is here with us, both representing ruangrupa and good school ecosystem. Ruangrupa is an art collective started in 2000 in Jakarta, Indonesia. Since 2013, the group with other collectives started to build ecosystems based on an understanding that it is better not to stand alone, but to be in a larger context. This is the way how they eventually established Good School Ecosystem, formed as a space in 2018 as an informal educational platform. It sustains the role of alternative spaces as visionary spaces to provide contextual responses to inhabit post-authoritarian Indonesian cultural landscapes. It functions as a niche in the public educational infrastructure and a sustainable support system within the local art ecosystem. And before we may start the conversation, I would like to also set a few guidelines for ourselves and for the audience for the later Q&A session. So the first part of the discussion will be around 40 minutes, and then we will open it up for you. And it is important to lay down that the topic of this roundtable is Lumbung, experiences, lessons learned, visions for the future, and I would like to take this framework seriously, and because I think this is more outweighed and future-oriented to talk about the aftermath of the document and the possible ways to continue as Lumbung in Hajnalka. And I believe that as the main concept suggests that the document 15 was a pilot project for a long-term envisioned project with the participants and beyond. So let's keep in mind that this is our agenda for today. And for those who would not know what Lumbung is, just to summarize it very fast, it was the main motive that gave the base for the concept of document 15. It is a vernacular agrarian term in Indonesia, which refers to a rice barn where village communities store their harvest together, and they manage it collectively as a way to face the unpredictable future. And after learning that there are other initiatives worldwide who practice Lumbung values in different ways, ruangrupa decided to invite 14 initiatives to become part of the Lumbung building processes before and beyond document 15. These initiatives became known as Lumbung in Hajnalka members, and this is how we are here. Now, OFF-Biennale and ZKU are also part of the Lumbung in Hajnalka. So now let's finally start, and sorry for the long introduction. There are 3 sections that I would like to touch upon during the conversation. It will be, the first will be about Lumbung in the documenta, second the Lumbung now, and the third is the Lumbung in the future. But before, I prepared a warm-up question for you, which is a very fast. I would like to ask you to just answer with only one word, maybe. So, if I ask you to think about being a member of the Lumbung in Hajnalka, now, after 1 year of the documenta, what is the really first and current emotion that comes up? Maybe Farid, you can start.
Yeah, thank you. Well, before I answer with one word, I just want to say thank you for having me. I hope you can hear me okay, see me okay, and then although I cannot see everyone in the room in Budapest, but my one reading. What I can say, decompress maybe right now. That's it. Because it's only one word. And so I'm going to pass the mic to whoever wants to take it.
Sorry, can you maybe repeat the word because I just didn't understand.
Okay. So decompress, it's like a zip file, no? Like you need to decompress it in the computer. Yeah.
Thank you. Matthias?
Hi. My word is truthfulness. Truthfulness is the opposite, the antagonist of cluelessness. The cluelessness was something, a state of or emotional state that we were going through last year, and after a reflective process that we've been gathering some clues, and yeah, it's basically a bit like hypnosis.
Okay, thank you.
I would choose nostalgia because it's been a year, so it was you guys. That's it.
I have more terms in my mind. And can you hear me? That's not a term. Curiosity, something like that.
Thank you. I was really curious of these answers because I also got to know that you didn't really meet after this year. So I was really curious what's in your mind, and this was kind of an alternative question about how are you. So thank you for the answers. And now I would like to ask my first real question, which will be about your contributions to Lumbung. So not actually documented, but I'm curious about what was your contribution to Lumbung during the Documenta 15, and how would you evaluate this contribution from a community perspective, and what could other members really learn from you? And actually, I didn't think about so anybody who would like to answer can start. Okay, so maybe.
Okay, I start. I think we were a little bit detached in the term that we couldn't spend as much time in Kassel as other Lumbung members. But we participated in several working groups, which was a learning experience for all of us. And I don't really know what we could teach the others, so I don't think it would be a good thing that I could reply to that. Well, I know that we really learned a lot, not only Indonesian and other terms that we regularly use in our daily vernacular, like no-chrome or whatever, but we also learned the way of seeing ourselves as part of something bigger, and to consider several ways of continuing our own operation based on the things that we heard from other Lumbung members. So we learned really a lot. I don't think we have totally one accent.
Can I continue?
Yes.
I think we can say that there were at least 3 periods of Lumbung. So one was like the pre-documenta, when we were, as Kati mentioned, we were discussing a lot through Zooms and online. And when I mentioned to you the members are working. And somehow it was sometimes too much, to be honest, because there were too much information. But since we kept, learning how they introduce themselves, how we introduce ourselves to be understood by the others, and since we use probably different terms and we perceive things differently, and this is how we got to know. And the second period, I would say, was the documental, and the Lumbung was on stage. So it was, when you are on stage, it's a bit difficult even to practice the Lumbung, although I think it was successful, but maybe before it, we'll explain more about that. And now we are in the third period, like the after documental period, when it's really, somehow it's going to real, and whether it works or not, and new practices maybe should be involved. What they could learn from us, we don't know really, so maybe we should ask others. That's it.
Thank you. So, Matthias, maybe you can follow.
Yeah, I really like talking about these different three phases because they actually work very, very different. And I also have a difficult to say like what people can really learn from us. But what I can say that especially in the first phase, this was basically the turf that all of these groups that had been invited and working in any way, so the exchange that was happening, the mutual learning, was a very natural thing. It felt at least like that for everyone. Whereas once we took this onto the stage, it became apparent how the German public, on the one side, was totally ready for that, and totally not ready for it. Meaning, a lot of people really embraced the outcomes of what we had discussed beforehand, and then the media just wasn't ready for dealing with it, as there was a huge paradigm shift in there from what had happened in the document into the editions before and what people were able to see here. So I think there was a huge, let's say, learning for us in there how big the difference can be from working internally, like with peers and people you know, and then taking that to the stage that deals with it in a completely different way. And we're now in the third phase also, where we're trying to, take these learnings on how we better try to communicate and use channels that really reach out to the communities we want to reach out. That's the learning that we got out of the second phase, and then we're trying to apply in the third phase. So much to say about learning. However, I don't know, maybe I can now show people how to build a boat from a roof. That's the only thing that we're good at.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always very important to hear the information from the first hand and your experiences, because that's totally different from the surface what people might understand from it. Farid, would you like to also answer?
Yeah, maybe it's like a short addition to what has been said as well. Like from outside, from inside, and all those differences. Like for those who spend Lumbung, like us, for example, for 3 years, for building Lumbung around 2015, or for those who can only experience it for a couple of hours. I think at least the way we thought about it is like one is not more valid than the other. So it's actually a good. That's why I said the compassion as well, because like there are so many things we experience in a relatively short amount of time. especially when we're on stage. And when we're on stage, as many would know, in Zoom maybe it's different, but really on stage, reality is different, fun is different, and all that kind of stuff. So it needs time, I think. And maybe also it has been shown in previous documentation, for example, the digestion only started when it closed, and then at least in ruangrupa and in school, we know we have to do a homecoming, meaning that we've been talking about locality and all that kind of stuff. But as much as we try not to be forgetful or contact, we were taken, better than before, let's say, or better than we were not fully expected, of course, to a certain extent. We were successful in that sense, that we're still doing a continuation of what we've been doing, but also a basic question. That when we started working for Documenta 15, it was beginning of 2019, and Good School was founded by the end of 2018. We have still present. We have to come back to the same questions again and again and again, the same problems, and we're still facing the same problems. We're not. We cannot sustain our practice better than oral meta, for example, in reality, and then we have to deal with it all together. The difference may be because of the learning. Coming back again to learning, which has been touched upon by many. The difference, we've experienced something much more intense in the last 3 years or so. So the hours we spent, we've become more experienced coming out of Documenta 15. I hope it's not too winding, my answer. Sorry, it's too long.
No, it's totally fine. And I was happy that you mentioned digestion, because one of your main motives was also harvesting, and I somehow imagine that during this year you harvested everything, or during the 100 days of document, and now maybe locally you consumed all the harvest, and now we are at this very long time for the digestion, and that's an important phase. So thank you. And now I would like to jump to the second section, which is about the Lumbung now. And I think how I understand and how you communicated on the document as well, that the concept of Lumbung interlocal is meant to be a long-term, self-governed global community and worldwide network, which really captivated me, because it seemed like a really huge work that you've done. And I'm curious that after 1 year that you can see everything from a more objective perspective. How do you see? What do you think it's a realistic or more of a visionary idea? And how does it work now? And what are the practical steps that has been taken in this year to make this work? Eszter?
So this is the after document video. I think it's really difficult to emphasize what kind of practices actually we've been doing after the document as you call it, Lumbung, because we are still, I think, digestion period, and it's also, I think, we don't have to concentrate 100% on really the practices. It's more about, for me at least, and the way how I could translate the Lumbung practice. It's a kind of symbolic. I know that the practice is important, but it's more kind of way of thinking, how we approach our local network and how we try to extend this local network into the regional network or maybe even beyond. And if we talk about one local Lumbung community, I would use rather plural, like communities. And probably we don't have to follow all the rules, maybe rule is not the best term, but somehow also trying to figure out our own set of rules. So it's somehow the mixture of the experiences, what we get from the documenta, but also the way how we can think it further or extend or change maybe. But definitely a few terms should be kept in our mind, like humor, generosity, transparency, sustainability, which probably sounds a bit like a buzzword, but if we really think of that, how we can use these theses or techniques, I think we still have a lot to learn. Yeah, I leave the mic to Kati.
Yeah, I think the key question is sustainability. Similarly to good school, OFF-Biennale isn't now much of a place than it was prior the documenta experience. But I think that's the most important part of what we have learned, or we have harvested from our fellow Lumbung members, is that we have this idea as to how to go on, meaning that you really need to extend your basically policies in terms of you might think of reaching out beyond the NGO aspect of your organization. You might think about making something profitable that you put back in your NGO agenda. But that's something that we still need to figure out and still need to work on. So we will be very, very thankful if this discussion with our fellow Lumbung members will continue so that we can learn more about it.
Thank you. Maybe Matthias, could you please continue?
Yeah, my feeling is that actually our organization and our group hasn't really changed that much after, in the wake of during Documenta. But what has changed is the ecosystem that we act in. So the audience has changed, and the perception of collective action and collective artistic work has changed. There are a lot more collective approaches in the art world surrounding us here in Berlin. So the ecosystem has become also inspired by Documenta, more diverse, and in that sense we are also forced to also review our ideas and because we see them everywhere popping up, stuff that we've been talking about 2 or 3 years ago in the preparation for Documenta, and they've become sort of a natural kind of way of acting in the art world, which is great. And of course, for us, that means is an incentive to think on new things. So that is maybe the biggest change, not so much within us, but much more in our ecosystem.
Thank you. If Farid also would like to say something, or should we move on?
Yeah, hopefully it can be shorter at least. The notion of communities or ecosystem is like jumping on or piggybacking on things that has been said. And again, I think we understand it as our things that we know. Documenta 15 was bigger than we really thought it would be. It was actually too big for us, talking from good school ruangrupa perspective. Debatable, but at least for us, scale is something that we should have known better to keep. And then exactly because of that, and then also we ask a lot, we ask even too much from everyone. Their experience, all those kind of stuff. Coming from that realization, that's why also kind of we need, at least in ruangrupa, we know that we have to, even to regroup is a bit difficult right now, I have to say, because people have their own pace in how to decompress, whether it's from resting, that thing that I need to take time off. The other one that we need to keep on going, even busier than before. And then it happens from both extremes and in between. And then how to reconnect, and then how to understand ecosystems, localities, communities, and all those kind of stuff. What we built, what we had, what we still have, and all those kind of stuff. What we thought we would achieve, and then what in reality we actually achieve. So, it needs to be leveled out first. Then I think it takes time, and then as we all know, maybe practice work is slow work, and then I think consciously we're taking time for better or worse. And then learning, the last thing I want to say is about sustainability, because I can only guess, but I think I've talked about it. That's exactly what we want to learn from each other when we thought in the beginning, if I talk wedding or if I had that stuff to extend the invitation to others, because we have different type of precariousness, then how to overcome it. And hopefully that's what we could achieve in the future. And it doesn't have to be as big as 2015, always, it's too big of a ship to have. But even small but many, I think it would be much more imaginable. I would stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for mentioning this big scale or large scale, because sometimes large scale can bring kind of unsustainable consequences. And I was thinking while you were answering that I also have experience in organizing community, and what we always faced as a challenge, that how can we make people to feel responsible towards the community. And I think it's a very important question to maybe talk about, that how, if it's really a long-term and future-oriented initiation, how the members can still feel responsible towards it, and how can they act, and what will be the motivation for the action. What do you think about it?
If I may short this, sorry. Yeah, something like this actually, like you guys have initiated to continue meeting as small as possible, contribution in Zoom, it's not that much, honestly, from my side at least. But even that, or streaming will move again. And this is outside of us, ruangrupa talking. That type of thing actually energizes because it shows as well that we don't bertahan or seeing things sudah selalu air that Lumbung can be anyone, because it's not how to begin with anyway, especially if they're talking in Indonesian context. Everyone can use it, and it's the experience that way. ways, for better or worse. Then, but like what's manageable as a scale, and then, but of course, yes, we realize that like it's such a shame that hasn't dissipate in the next year or in the next years, because we had something valuable when we were on the stage. That's how we felt in Roundtable. We like that. We thought art, like before the open, before we came on stage all together, should Lumbung continue and why? Actually, bring the stage part of like answers came automatically, and I hope things, although different answers, but like I hope many people feel the same way that in that department. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add the word motivation story. I think it's really like we met so many nice and cool people, and it's really up to this kind of personal preference or what we really had going on, even only through online conversations, but sometimes by personal conversations. That's something that we want to go back to.
Maybe it's important that if there are individuals in the community, they should feel their own responsibility, but only when they feel the sense of being part of the community. So it's like two sides of the coin. The community has to invite them and somehow has to introduce the different kind of feelings or sense of belongingness, and I mentioned that already. And the individuals also should somehow do something to be part of that community.
And do you feel to belong?
Of course.
Thank you. Matthias, I heard you that you would say something.
I just wanted to add a few ideas around the scale of things, because while we were doing this whole thing, and after we went on stage, it almost felt like we were sort of part of a gameplay where we sort of live this economic theory of the tragedy of the commons, sort of economic theory of Eszter, which is very related to scale. And where sort of when you overscale the sort of mutual wins of the community, stop working for trust reasons and various other reasons. And I think this is really also a little bit what happened. The scale became so huge that the tragedy of the commons really came to play. It became super difficult to create, or in this moment of being on stage, to keep this coherence within the group together. People, at least that was my feeling, was then so driven by their own, challenges that they had, with their work or whatever was going on, that this mutual sort of support that the commons usually serve became less in the foreground, and therefore that's learning also that we saw we shouldn't scale things necessarily. Maybe it's sometimes really good to be just an example of how things can work, and not to do the whole thing, but rather have or do an experiment around this and not have the aspiration to change the whole system.
It might not be possible, I think, but that you're mentioning these practices and models, that we have not much time left for the Q&A. I would like to have just the last question is about this expression that you call it study of models. That it really, for me, I had the feeling that the whole document was an experiment to try traditional and also contemporary practice models in a large scale, And I'm really curious of how do you think that these practices could be domesticated in your local activities? For example, for you, as you are on the preparation period for the next OFF-Biennale, is there any of these experience models that you would maybe build in your concept? I mean, like, for example, the collective boat or this harvesting and all these kind of practices.
Well, harvesting we always did, not that beautifully. Several harvesters did during the documented process. We are old-fashioned dinosaurs who take mammals. We have a huge archive of different kind of mammals. And yes, we also try to initiate a conversation with participants before on various aspects of the decision-making process. But yes, it's a very, very new way to us to reconsider how to prepare for the next OFF. And the next roundtable discussion would also be about how we would like to practice this Lumbung idea on a regional level. Yeah, landscaping is a good way to, or seems to be a good way to go about these problems.
Maybe Matthias or Farid, would you like to add something to this question?
If you don't mind me going, I guess, I would say, like, this, I'll come back to this notion, our notion of homecoming. Like, the agencies has become different for us back home. Like, for better or worse as well. And then we have to keep in check the lessons we learned about scale, for example, about time, and all those kind of stuff. And I would say, like, what we set up to do was not necessary. What we set up to do was actually a challenge. What Matthias was saying as well before, like, after we did what we did, we know that, like, how much of a scale that we could handle, and then how much of a change that it was possible, which one is actually, like, hopeless, and all those kind of stuff. But that's exactly why we agreed upon doing that in the first place, because we want to try. And then if we fail, we fail, and if we had a lot of failures, although I think we achieved a lot of important milestones, at least for our side, looking back in retrospect. And then how we can realize what agencies we have right now in our own context, and I'm not talking about Jakarta, Indonesia, or Southeast Asia, and all those kind of stuff, but like even beyond geography, I would say, and what to do with it. And I know because where we're at, I know it's not an easy thing to answer, and the answer should be in action as well. Again, it's not like, not about only learning from artists, I would say, but like what to do with the artists. Just one example, practical example. What to do with the artists, with the many artists that we have, for example. How many people can avoid what we did or what we went through, and how many people can also repeat what we have set up, with like we did as well, of course, like learning from others who was before us, no? But it's much more, let's say, at least trying an attempt in generosity. It's like giving away, but keep in mind that Lumbung is the right start. Your first question maybe like what contribution one have to do to Lumbung instead of only taking. Because if it's only taking, then Lumbung again, then it's not working anymore as well. And then yeah, with that realization and all that kind of stuff, hopefully the mindset will shift in a bit, and then it takes time to actually shift things. I don't know. I'll stop there.
Matthias?
Yeah, how to domesticate all these ideas that are floating around and all these different harvests. That's a huge problem. You know, so many harvests, this huge archive, mental archive, but also real archive. But what we're trying, what we're doing very concretely is, for example, exactly we're establishing a collective residency. Like we will have very solid, more studios where only collectors can come and work, and not like solo artists, just because we want to foster that idea more. And we've more or less decided, or are more or less on our way out of the art world. We don't see what we do in the art world. We see the things that we do as experimental infrastructures, and it is difficult for the art world to perceive this in the right way. And that's we don't feel at home there so much anymore. And want to continue doing our experimental infrastructure work, and that's a learning that we've taken out of it. And of course, we still have the board that's in the harbor somewhere in the middle of Germany. So that's also something that we still need to domesticate. But we will.
Thank you. I think this is our duty in every local audition. I think this is the time now for opening up for the audience, this conversation. So if anybody has questions, then please. We have one.
Thank you. My name is Eszter, and I would like to return to one of your answers, Matthias, when you talked about the reaction of the German audience, that you said that part of it could take the Lumbung conception and part of it couldn't. And then in another answer, you said that the perception of the collective work has changed. So first, I would like to ask if you could define what part of the German audience could take the Lumbung concept, and what do you think, I mean, how the perception of the collective work has changed? Because how to say, I live about German culture, but it's a farid culture, so people like to work collectively in general, and how did it change this? And one more question to Eszter and Kati, which is very similar. So what do you think about the Hungarian audience? How they took the Lumbung conception, and if you could define what part of the Hungarian audience could take it well, and what part didn't. So it's two questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I think maybe Matthias can start with the answer.
Thanks, Andrea, for your question. It was the audience that's was able to grasp and appreciate the documented way was the general audience. So it's like a Publikumsausstellung, Germans would say, which is an exhibition that is not for the art critics, but for the actual audience and participants of the exhibition. And they were ready for that, but the German art critique wasn't ready for it. And there was this huge discussion of, I don't know, remember this field of art because of collective authorship and responsibility and blah blah blah. So the art critics, this was a huge brain fog. Whereas that the sole authorship of artists is now obsolete, and the idea of art doesn't exist anymore. And so they just couldn't take it. The art critics and the general audience was very, that experienced by experiencing what they saw, by tangibly participating in the work, appreciated it. And it was very difficult for them to voice though. So that's some of my personal perception on this division that I've been talking about. And yes, you're right, Germany generally has a huge culture of fines, lesen and stuff like that, but when it comes to the idea of art, that this idea of collective achievement for various historical reasons is, almost non-existent. So even a Kunstverein and an art association, you would still find rather exhibitions by, solo exhibitions by artists, or group exhibitions by solo artists, but you would not find a space takeover by a collective. That is still, a very difficult idea, even in the Vereinswelt of the art world. Maybe just to say a few words about that, but yeah, that's maybe my personal idea around this. I hope that answers the question.
Maybe I want to pick up one particular audience, like the students, like art students and creative students, because some of them had the chance to see the whole documenta, so it was somehow easier for me to explain to them after seeing the documenta during like half a year, during one semester series, what actually the Lumbung means. And I think the easiest way how they could perceive the Lumbung concept was when I went to the practical things. So for example, if there's a collective pot and there's a certain amount of money, what kind of decision process can distribute this collective pot, the money, to different kind of projects. And it was for me quite interesting how immediately they grasped one of the main importance of the Lumbung, the collective decision making, also in terms of financial thing. It was a bit of time to explain to them and to discuss with them what the Lumbung could be meant and what the Lumbung mean. But this is a smaller audience. I don't know if you would like to read a bigger area.
The general public doesn't really follow contemporary art events, even on a scale of documenta, so only the scandal reached them. And I think we are still, so the contemporary art in itself is still digesting it. So there is, for instance, an ongoing series of essays and articles that are being published on the website, and it's still going on. So we're still waiting for the reply in many ways.
Thank you. Is there any more questions from the audience? I was actually thinking about this, what you just mentioned last, that I think in the book and also in every printed and written text, it was very clear that the whole concept of Lumbung didn't want to follow the Western rules and patterns of what we consider as art, because it's not something very universal. But I was thinking about what you think. Do we really need legitimization from the Western public? It's a hard question. maybe it can be just an open question to think about. But is there any from the audience?
Maybe, oh, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
We started not with that dichotomy, I would say. Like, we know, it's not like we're against something. We just know what worked for us and then we try to work with it, you know? So the antagonism, I think it's a byproduct, it's not an intention. Like, we will not, I would say that, like, you know, we're looking for ways to exist, and then we don't mind if others exist. The problem is like when the others try to silence us, you know, and then it's kind of like it's not geographical. Even in Indonesia, it's the same, you know, like it's about mindset, I would say. And then it's a model, so it's like it's a battle of software. It becomes like that. And then to put it like this is one positive side of being on stage, like to put that battle open, to open it up, to look to make it actually digestible to bigger public. Because before that, or at least in Indonesia, before that it was kind of like very secluded conversation between art workers. And what Matthias said as well, you know, like maybe it's not in the art world we need to live. There's a bigger world out there. That's it. Then it's fine. The art world gets to exist. And then, but other world can exist as well. That's it.
Thank you. I agree. Maybe somebody already thought about a question from the audience. I think we don't have much time remaining, so maybe the last question. No. Okay. I would like to also ask you, maybe you have some question to each other or.
Well, there are a lot of questions. I mean, I haven't seen Farah for a long time, and everyone's been, you know, in their rabbit holes back again. But maybe it's not the stage for these questions that I have here. You know,
I feel the same. Like off stage, on stage analogy we've been using, and last hour or so. I think like I want to start off stage. I have a lot of questions as well. Like, I want to know how everyone is, but yeah, I don't think it's public consumption. But it's really nice to hear you and see you all again. Thank you very much. For my side.
Okay, so I think we will finish now, and thank you for your participation, and please stay for the next panels, and I would like to maybe call Eszter for confirmation, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, so for the Eszter and colleague Matthias. And yes, so I would like to ask our fellow East European Alliance members and Edwin Petrányi to come for the next panel. And I will also introduce Coffee, and just while our fellow members are coming, I would just also like to say that also as one of the mentioned, that this is a midway journey between for us as a Biennale from 2015 to the next edition of Biennale Budapest, which will be 2024. Yes.
látszott volna, hogy jól látszott, hogy sokkal többen mondok.
So, welcome to the next panel, which we will still talk a little bit about Lumbung, but more from the perspective of how is it relevant, and how is it relevant in the eastern part of Europe, and more importantly, what are the practices that we have been already engaged with, which can be related to Lumbung. But before we go into the panel, I would like to introduce Katalin Erdődi, who will be hosting and moderating this panel, and then she will introduce the other participants. Katalin Erdődi is a curator and a dramaturg based in Vienna, who works with a focus on socially engaged art, experimental performative practices, and artistic interventions in the rural and urban public spheres. Katalin has worked for art institutions and festivals such as the Stenischer in Graz, Schult in Vienna, Giertaka in Leipzig, in Trafo, Budapest, and also co-founded Plus Festival in Budapest, a festival for science-specific performance and art in public space. And from her current project, I would like to point out that she's the curator of Biennale Art in Prague, which will happen next year. And her recent curatorial research focuses on critical rural art practices and investigates social change in rural areas of Eastern Europe through collaborative artistic and curatorial approaches, with a particular interest in post-socialist transformation, which she addresses with decolonizing feminist methodologies. And in 2022, she received the Gonzaga Award grant for globally embedded and inclusive curatorial practice. And thank you so much, Katalin, again, for hosting us and for hosting this panel and leading the discussion.
Thank you so much, Eszter and Luca, for the invitation and for organizing this panel. Welcome everyone to the panel and on the panel. I mean, as you can see, we're an in-person panel, which is really wonderful. We have several voices. One voice will probably accompany us throughout the panel. But now I would like to shortly introduce the panelists and then talk a bit about how we decided to structure the discussion, and detailed bios will follow before each impulse. So welcome to the panel, Eszter, Veronika Janatkova, Iggy, Teresa Steskalova, Bartek Krakowiak, and Lajva Krishna and Eszter Szakács. So who you see here are the EIBA, East Europe Biennial Alliance members. And so actually I had the impression that from the previous panel we will be switching scales, let's say. So we will be going to discussions around grassroots biennials in the former East, or I mean geographically still current East Europe. And the theme of this panel is just to go with a very precise and rather long title, How to Lumbung in the East of Europe, negotiating the tensions between the precariousness of self-organized biennials and the desire for regenerative cooperation. And actually we decided to dedicate the panel rather to the focus on regenerative cooperation. So in our preparatory meeting, we decided that we will not discuss one topic. So we have kind of an effort for this panel, which is we will not be discussing the lack of financial means. So we are, of course, well aware that the region is definitely a region in which the paradigm of scarcity and precariousness and lack of resources has been and probably will be a recurring problem for some time to come. But we decided that as often many discussions end or begin and end with the lamentation about the lack of financial means, we will now focus on means and forms of collaboration which are non-monetized and which can rely on resources other than the financial ones. So I will also try as a moderator And regarding the structure of the panel, we will start with impulses from each of the IBA members. These will be short impulses in which everybody will partly look back to certain aspects of what IBA has already done together and also look forward towards future possibilities of cooperation and different ways of working together. And these will be around 5 minutes, and afterwards we will go into a collective discussion and also open up to you for questions. And I mean, I think almost everybody is aware of what East Europe Biennial Alliance is, but nevertheless I would like to shortly say a few words about the alliance and its background. So East Europe Biennial Alliance exists since 2019. And the members are, you haven't listed the members yet, have you? Or have you already talked about the members? I can't, okay. The members are a biennial matter of art in Prague, organized by the Czech branch of Transit, Biennale Warszawa, it's exactly Teresa, Veronica, and Iggy. Biennale Warszawa is represented by Bartek, and the LCC, Latvian Center for Contemporary Arts and Survival Kit Festival, is represented by Lyra, OFF-Biennále represented by Eszter, Szakács, and Kiev Biennial and the Visual Culture Research Center, yes, okay, is represented by Eszter. And the alliance exists since early 2019. And one of the things that I wanted to point out that, of course, we can already appreciate the conditions of the region and the changing conditions of the region if we think about all that happened between 2019 and 2023, specifically in this region. So we are, since more than 1 year, faced with a large-scale political crisis, which is the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, but also other crises that have been the result of this political crisis. And of course, we are also faced in the region with changing cultural politics, which we will also talk about, especially in the case of Biennale Warszawa. This is just to say, I mean, it's not a competition, but I think that an alliance is, this alliance is definitely conditioned by the fact that the circumstances are constantly changing, and therefore the members are constantly having to not only assert themselves in their local context in response to these changes, but also think about cooperation and the needs of cooperation, or the need to cooperate, the desire to cooperate in very different ways. And just regarding the ethos of IBA, which I think is important to mention. So it's an alliance of grassroots biennials that is also organized around transnational solidarity, collectivity, exchange, mutual aid, and with a desire to consider what art can be in different social contexts, and also how art can reach new audiences, which is something that was already a topic in the previous panel. It's organized around shared political values, but also around the commitment, the shared commitment towards art as a tool for social change and political emancipation. And there's a shared interest in also redefining or retelling different stories and histories connected to the region of East Europe, which I think is important to mention, and also the relations that this region has to different parts of the world, especially Global South, and I mean also the history of